Former British and Irish Lion Paul Wallace and IRB executive member Bob Latham from the United States recently came to the Turks and Caicos Islands to take part in the inaugural Rugby Ryder Cup. Paul, captaining the European Lions, and Bob, captaining the Barbarians, played with the Turks and Caicos members young and old. Welcome back to the Turks and Caicos Islands. Not your first tour out here. Have you seen a lot change since you were here last time?
A hell of a lot on the rugby front. I think thankfully the Turks and Caicos is still the same island it was when I was here, 2.5-3 years ago. Brilliant, had a great time here so far, but absolutely blown away with what's happened on the rugby side. First of all, the new pitch, the stadium, the bar, everything is. I saw it 2.5 years ago, and they said this is what the stadium's going to look like, and I said, yeah, well, it could never be. Look at the climate, where are you going to get the water, but the green of the grass as well is just amazing. But the most amazing thing is the amount of players that are now playing, and especially young players, young Turks players, the belongers that are playing. To go out when there was 3 young players under the age of 15 last time I was over. This time it's a coaching session on Saturday, and there was about 18 players under 18. So that's just great progress, and then hopefully that'll keep happening. There's some of the younger players that have been over to Ireland and Leinster and academies, and when they travel outside of the Turks and Caicos, they'll actually find out a lot more about rugby, and hopefully this will grow and they'll show that international influence back to the players that begin to learn the game.
The reason you were over was for the inaugural Rugby Ryder Cup.
Which we won.
Which the European team won, and as a result of that, you got to play with players of varying experience levels. What did you think of the guys you got, and women who you got to have a run around with?
It was great. I think it's brilliant to have the women involved as well with the tag rugby. It's a great, and you can see it not just on the pitch playing, but behind the organisation and everything. It's great to get all the women involved in any rugby club. Also, the young players playing the over 40s, I found actually was certainly my limit at this stage of my injuries, and that the under 40s was a bit more of a struggle, and the under 25s was that was the end of me, I think. But it was great to see that so many players were there to play at so many different levels, and also the enjoyment afterwards. What a great atmosphere, when you can just sit out and have a couple of quiet beers and talk about the game. Awarding the caps was huge as well, and so deserved. All the work that it's taken for the Turks and Caicos to get that international recognition against Jamaica.
Obviously, you're out here playing for the European Lions. It would be remiss of us to not ask you a couple of questions with the Lions tour coming up this year. You have a unique viewpoint on the Lions, given the fact that your older brother Richard was on the 93 tour, you were there in 97, and your younger brother David was there as well. How much has the Lions as a team and as a touring experience changed?
It sort of changed in the wrong ways, where the game has got more professional. The Lions tried to adopt this overly professional way, and it sort of ruined the culture, and I think that's what the most professional tour was probably the tour to New Zealand, which was the biggest disaster, and everyone could see a disaster looming, because anyone who's toured and played with the Lions knows it's a different concept where you're trying to gel 4 teams into one. It's that one little snapshot in your rugby career where you may have just been a journeyman player, but you might come into your own for that one period of time, and you can be one of the great players of world rugby, yet you're not playing well enough at that stage. So it's a lot about how you get on the day, whereas in some international teams you go on tour and it's all about building to the next World Cup, and you going into that tour there's a starting 15 and maybe one or two players might break in, but with the Lions it's always a great team when it's completely open season and the competition for places is there, but also you have the players and they get on so well with each other vying because they're all international starters themselves, and yet they expect to start, yet they're up against other rivals who are just as equally as experienced and talented. So it's great competition, but I was delighted to see in the last tour with Ian McGee came back. There's a lot more fun on the tour because that's what touring's about at whatever level. You've got to get out there, enjoy the country, and if you do that, you've got to play better rugby. It's as simple as that.
You say that the Lions obviously is all about picking the team that's ready to play at that moment, not building for the future. Who would you say are the players to watch in the next couple of months who really have a chance to bolt onto the scene?
I think there's a lot of players who've put their hands up. Cian Healy's done very, very well. I think Rory Best has come through as well for Ireland. Dan Cole in England. Simon Zebo on the wing. I think he's going to make it, maybe not the test team, but he's sort of come from nowhere really, I think, into the squad. I think the likes of Richie Gray in Scotland, yes, he probably put his hand up last year, but he's looking more and more like a certainty. Guys like Courtney Laws in England. Rob Shaw coming back into the scene as well. He's been immense for England, both as a captain and a player. And, he's not too far off being Lions captain at this stage. I think it will be Brian O'Driscoll, but I think Rob Shaw has shown that he's certainly going to challenge him very hardly for that. Also, Manu Tuilagi, I think, has been outstanding. I think he's going to really push for a test side as well, just as sheer athleticism. We've got Tim Visa maybe up in Scotland. But there's a lot of good young talent coming through.
In terms of the Lions experience and how you interact with other players, how did your relationship change going from an adversarial role to suddenly your colleagues facing against a combative South African team?
Yeah, we spent about 10 days doing all this team building, and it was very intense. So you're working with all these guys, getting to know each other, and with all these different challenges we had to do. And the day before we left, we were combining this with training, of course, and the day before we left we just went out for a few beers, and I think we had more bonding over a few beers than everyone. But it was great like that. And one of the other things is you always put in with your opposite number to room with, and you really get to know the guys there. We were very lucky that a lot of the guys were from the amateur era, even though it was the start of the professional era, and that sort of ethos was there, and the players basically really got on with each other, and there was no prima donnas on the tour.
You made the transition from being a former player to being a presenter. What was the biggest challenge that you found moving to the other side of the TV screens?
In the studio pundit, it can be a difficult one. The first few years, you're playing colleagues, guys you've played with, and you might be stating the obvious about them, but if there's anything negative, they'd always took it, if it was someone else who did it, but you're their ex-teammate, to say that. It was taken on board maybe sometimes overly negatively. So that was always very tough. But, if you're going to get into that game, you just got to do it. It's like playing rugby. You got to do it to the best of your ability. And to do that, you got to call it as you see it. And maybe there's a lot of players coming out now who aren't able to do it. So it's very tough for those years where you have guys that you're very close with, ex-teammates. And, if they're coming to the end of their years, they're not playing particularly well, and there's a younger player coming through, you got to say it. Cut.